Okay, so a very long time ago, really, really long, so long that even if you spent your entire life at a monastery practicing imagining time, you probably still wouldn't get a good understanding of how long ago this was. So, let's try to ignore how long ago it was, because it's kind of an impossible task to really understand. But we can still think about it, which is cool. Anyway, so what happened was a long, 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 long time ago, near the beginning of this thing that we are in, there was all these little particles. And those little particles existed because when things started, the way the littlest things that started liked to be next to other little things that were part of the things that started. And those made basically what we call like atoms and molecules. Those are the words that we come up with to describe the things. So these tiny little things that we call atoms or molecules were in space, right? But the thing is, what's weird about the way that the whole thing came together is that things that exist want to be near more things that also exist. And so you end up with a lot of these little things, very little, barely together things, coming together, and they make bigger things. And then those little things become bigger things, and those things are basically what we like to call stars, right? So these things that are called stars, or what we call stars, existed a long, long time ago. Lots of them. And what was cool about them is they would, make a lot of light, which is actually, we get to see a lot of them from a long time ago because they're so far away, and the light is still getting here. But anyway, that's beside the point. But in these stars, they take the energy that was in all the little parts, that it got all those little part energies from whatever happened at the beginning. And it takes them and through a process gets energy out of them. But when it gets energy out of them, it also kind of like makes them heavier, right? And by that, I don't mean actually like basically when you take some energy out of one and you take energy out of another one, they kind of miss the energy, and since they can't get the energy, they go to each other. And when they go to each other, they make a new thing, a thing that never existed before. It's a molecule, which is a few atoms together, right? And so a sun or a star over time will make these larger things, larger than the original things. And then a long, long, long time, and then the star explodes because it no longer is strong enough to hold itself together. And then these larger molecules kind of float out into space. And then those larger molecules get sucked into another collection of molecules that are coming together, and that becomes a star again. But this time, they become even bigger molecules because all those little parts still want to have connections with other things because they lose all their energy. And when you lose energy, they need to find companions that fit the criteria that they want to be with. And when I say want, they don't actually want it. Like, they don't have feelings. But it's like the thing that drives the universe that is within them is causing them to, if they can, make an arrangement with another thing that will supply them with the thing that they were used to. If that's making any sense. So, over time, over many stars, growing, living their lives and dying in huge explosions. Sizes that we can't even comprehend. Again, try not to think too much about this because it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it does because it makes sense, but it's not really where our brain is supposed to be. Anyway, so eventually you get these larger molecules that never existed before because the stars that they were in kept putting more and more material together until they were the thing that they were, which was a larger thing than had ever existed as a molecule. And then at some point, these larger things that were made in many, many stars collect with each other, because things that are heavy, like, or things that have mass, or things that exist, want to be next to things that exist. And sometimes the things that exist don't go into stars, they just kind of collect together. And if there's enough of the heavy things don't have the energy to make the sun, star things that we were talking about earlier, so they just become like planets or asteroids or stuff, because they don't have the energy, but they still have the mass, and the mass wants to be with the mass. Weird. Anyway, so at some point, there's a big ball of these heavier things, and that is the thing that we're on now, I think you're on now, called the Earth, or what we call the Earth. And that thing existed for a long time, and it was really hot at first because all the different parts came together with like a lot of energy, but not enough energy to make a star, but it still was like really hot. And then slowly the heat dissipated out into space, and a shell kind of formed on the outside, which wasn't as hot. And because it wasn't as hot, it allowed the molecules to become solid, which is a rare thing, actually, if you think about it, in the universe. There's not many cases where things become solid. Anyway, so they became solid, and then they arranged themselves, and at some point, all the molecules that were in the Earth, the lighter ones would come out, and that became like an atmosphere. And then they were light, but they weren't as light as the atmosphere. Those became like an ocean. And the ocean was basically just water and some other things that, kind of got pushed out because of the reactions of the heat and the other molecules that were in this giant orb. Anyway, so at some point, these really large molecules were able to kind of float around in the water, and they were able to arrange themselves according to the natural way that they wanted to be. The natural way that they arranged themselves because of the things that happened at the very beginning. And at some point, a group of these things arranged themselves in a way that was able to copy itself. So, like let's say we have, right, these two molecules, right, and they connect, right, in a certain way. But the way that they connected is so anytime another molecule, right, comes by, it connects to them in a way that it creates a lattice work that makes another one of the things, right? So you get two of them. And then the other one goes away. And then that one, because it's that way, makes more. And that keeps happening. And that's how things started. And at some point, the arrangement of the molecule things also made a protective layer, which allowed it to make more copies of itself without being interfered with by the outside world. And then, because of that, it was able to make more of itself better without having to worry, or not worry, without the risk of being destroyed by just the elements. And this protective layer, which was part of its own creative reality, like the thing that it would naturally do because of the way it was arranged, was really good, not good, it was beneficial to making more of itself. And because of that, it kept making more of itself. And sometimes it would change a little bit just because you can't make something over and over again without it being slightly different. So at some point, the thing was able to take in energy from the outside and helped make itself more. And that kind of kept going, and that became like plants. Like it used the photosynthesis of the sun's light to help it make more of itself. And then at another point, this thing that I guess we can call now a cell, figured out how to break down other cells to make more of itself. So it didn't have to take the outside energy from, the sun. It could just, find another thing that was like it, but not as strong as it, and break it down and then use all the parts. But then at some point, the thing that we call a cell now made a cell that had two cells. And the thing with two cells was more successful. Well, one of them was more successful at some point than the single cell. And the cells could now do different things. Like one could do one thing, and then another part could do another thing. And it became more efficient because it still was getting the energy that it needed to make more of itself, but now it could move around or do more things that let it make more of itself. And that kept happening for a really long time. And there would be a thing and it would do this, and if doing this helped it make more of itself, then there'd be more of them doing this. But if doing this didn't help, there still might be them, but not as many. But if it actually hurt the thing to do this, not hurt it, but if it made it harder for it to keep making more of itself, then they would kind of go away. And that keeps going on and on and on until now. And we're still doing that, sort of. But it's not as straightforward anymore, because the things that the thing does don't have to be physical anymore. Like, so as people, like sometimes the people who have the most kids are people who believe in certain things which tell them to have more kids, right? So it might be against logic, or it might be hurtful to the world, or whatever, but the people who make the most people, for whatever reason, whether it's they're the strongest, or they have the most natural resources, or they have the best technology, or they have ideas that make them make more of themselves, they will make more of themselves. And whole cultures grow and die because of this. Like at some point, there was a culture that existed where killing people was like good, because like you'd sacrifice them to the god, and that kind of mentality made the people stronger emotionally, or not stronger, but just made them able to do things that they wouldn't do otherwise. And so they were willing to do things that other people weren't, and so they did really well for a little while until they didn't, and then they went away. Possibly because another type of culture, of the similar type of creature, but the culture was a different type of culture, and that culture, part of it was a successful bent towards destroying and taking over and collecting resources. And so that's like a really important thing for life to continue, is that whatever it does well to make it continue. So we want to make life continue, but now we're kind of at this point where there's some people who feel that we can't keep making more of ourselves in the short term if we want more of ourselves in the long term. So, like, It's like if you had seeds and you had to eat like you could eat the seeds, but you could also plant the seeds. So you could eat all the seeds now and be full, or you could eat like 2 seeds now and plant the rest, and then maybe you could continue eating throughout the rest of your life. But that's also a risk because you don't know if it'll work. And, why not just eat the seeds now? Maybe you can find something else later. It's a very difficult thing. But it all happened because the way that these little things started off at the very beginning of everything, and they arranged themselves in certain ways, and then that's how we are here now. And that's it, I think. Unless you think there's more.